focus groups, or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program, day 2 from Pittsburgh at Netroots Nation, the big conference of progressives. Several hundred people from across the country coming together to talk about, hey, how do we change the world? How do we save the planet? How do we encourage workers to fight for better wages, hours, conditions? How do we empower people? How do we save we the people? How do we move this country in a direction where we once again care about each other and care about the values that made this country truly great? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, all of that. And today on the big program, we're going to talk to a bunch of folks doing some incredible work. And I'll tell you, I'm just blown away by some of the folks that we've met here. But on the education front, we're going to talk with Jeff Bryant about the work that he's doing. Also, Christian, we're going to get Kia Velkill from the Courier Newsroom, going to come share some thoughts about what's going on in Pennsylvania. Stephanie Taylor, co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, talking about, hey, what's a good candidate and what they should be focused on. And you're going to want to stick around for Caitlin Bailey. She's the founder and executive director of the Old Pros Online. Yes, that is what it is. The Old Pros, the oldest profession in the world. She wants to decriminalize sex work, so we'll talk a little bit about that. I find that I'm not overly thrilled. I'm a little worried about how that's going to go, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to it. Lots of interesting yesterday's program that I want to really quick go through. This conference I've been coming to for years, and out of this you get to, as I've said yesterday, you get to meet so many people doing incredible work, and the networking opportunities that come out of this, the idea that different groups can work together. That's the exciting part for me. And that's what I think the exciting part of these conferences are, and where the right does this so much better than the left. They have tons of these conferences and networking opportunities and ways to spread their bad ideas. Here you've got people talking about how do we expand people's rights? How do we expand workers' rights? How do we save the planet? And I think that's what we should be fighting for. It's a direction where we should be going. And that's why I come to these conferences, why I think it's so important that we cover it. And I got a bunch of people saying, hey, thanks, we appreciate the responses. We will be back in the studio very soon. But I love doing these conferences and these remotes because it gives us the opportunity to come out and meet people and to see folks. Lots of positive response. So our podcast friends who have come over and said hello, thank you. I guess our program had come up in a number of panels. So it tells me that we're reaching people. We're having the right conversations. We're focusing on the right things. And that makes me happy. Because at the end of the day, this program is about how do we make people's lives better? How do we move this country forward? And how do we make sure that what we leave behind is, something worth leaving behind for our children and grandchildren. So I hope you're enjoying our coverage here. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think of our coverage thus far. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Kia Velkill from the Courier Newsroom Group going to be here to share some thoughts on the conference and, some thoughts about Pennsylvania and the potential Nazi rally.
Thanks for tuning in to The Rick Smith Show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @Rick Smith Show, like us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all that and much more at thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1997. That was the day that a strike by the Teamsters Union against UPS ended with a victory for the union. The strike had started 15 days earlier. More than 180,000 UPS workers participated in the action. It was the first nationwide strike by UPS workers. At the time, UPS delivered 80% of all packages in the United States. The company, known for its signature brown trucks, delivered 12 million packages a day. The key issue of the strike was that the company increasingly relied on part-time workers. The insecurities of part-time work were growing, not just at UPS, but for workers in industries all across the country. The strike settlement came with the union winning its core issues. The company agreed to convert 10,000 part-time jobs to full-time positions over the course of the next 5 years. The victory was significant for the U.S. labor movement. The 1980s and 1990s saw new attacks on labor unions and working people, starting with President Ronald Reagan's breaking of the Air Traffic Controller Union strike in 1981. The UPS victory in a national strike with broad rank-and-file support encouraged working people beyond the Teamsters Union. Announcing the settlement of the strike, ABC News anchor Peter Jennings declared, quote, "It's been the most dramatic confrontation between industry and organized labor in 2 decades. Teamsters President Ron Carey said, quote, "It's what this country needs. Decent jobs, a chance for the dream, a chance to purchase a home, a chance to bring your children up properly, a chance to send them to college. Enough is enough. And it's about time that people start fighting back on this."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I woke up to the headlines. Doug Mastriano's opponents call him extreme, but his campaign may be resonating. And I'm going, wait a second. Is this a news story? Is this an opinion piece? And I'm going, I thought this was the liberal media over at ABC News. How is this news when you're saying, oh no, everyone calls him extreme, but you know what? His message may be resonant with who? Oh yeah, with other crazy people. I get that. And I decided not going to the Mastriano rally here in Pittsburgh. Turning Points USA, I guess the group putting it on with DeSantis. The rules to go as a member of the media, wow. One of the things, if you are recording anything, they demand that you give them access to whatever it is you're recording on demand. Wow. This to me, one of those moments where you elect someone like Mastriano, that freedom of the press thing, kiss that goodbye. And here to share some thoughts on, well, freedom of the press, the conference, and maybe the Nazi rally. I've asked Kia Valkill to come talk with us. He's a senior reporter over at Courier Newsroom, couriernewsroom.com, where he does some good Pennsylvania reporting. Kia.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
So what do you think of this headline that, you know what, Mastriano's opponents may think he's extreme, but, hey, the message of slashing education in half and, deciding, maybe voters don't really get to decide elections. That's resonating with some.
Yeah, I mean, there's a hint of truth to that in that, there is 40% of voters in most states, probably in Pennsylvania, right around there, that are going to vote for anyone with an R next to their name. And he won the Republican primary because he is the most, MAGA, most extreme, hardcore candidate. And, cutting education budget in half, making everyone re-register to vote in this state. Those are, I bet if you even polled his supporters, those would prove wildly unpopular, among some of them at least. And so those are not opinions that are going to be resonating with most Pennsylvanians. I do not believe that. And, what you see, I think, in that headline or that piece you're referencing is a reporter kind of inserting themselves, but calling it objective news, which, I don't have a problem with having a perspective. We at Courier Newsroom, we have a perspective, but we're honest about it.
No, you got to be upfront with it. ABC News is supposed to be, down the middle of the road. There's supposed to be news. And we're told by the folks on the right, liberal media. No. I'm confused at how this is either down the middle or anywhere liberal.
It's not. It's because when you say something like it's resonating, people are going to interpret that as, oh, maybe he's not as extreme. Maybe he is, there is something to him. Maybe I should vote for him. People do take cues. Not that, people can't develop their own opinions, but we do take cues from what we read, what we watch, who we hear from, and that's just how our brains work. So
right.
You do have an impact when you write that, or, when other reporters talk about how, I don't know, there was a piece in the New York Times the other day about how Trump is sucking up the limelight from Biden, but the whole piece was about Trump, and kind of it's
it was
baffling.
A self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, and so, Doug Mastriano, in any world, has extreme policies. That's not really up for debate. And, maybe that's my opinion, but I'm honest about it. And I think it'd be a better media environment if all reporters were.
No, I'm right there with you. Now, you've written a great piece over at Courier News, 5 ways Democrats have helped Pennsylvanians under Biden's leadership. And, I look at some of the legislation, especially recently, that's come out on gun reform, on the CHIPS bill, on this Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, just legislatively killing it.
Yeah, it's been a really, really strong couple months. The Inflation Reduction Act will, keep healthcare premiums low for hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians who get coverage through the Affordable Care Act. That's a lot of people who are going to, pay substantially less than they would have otherwise for health insurance.
But Kia, this isn't going to do anything to reduce inflation. Nothing. Nothing. I had a guy call last week. It's going to do nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, we will see, but, the hundreds of economists have wrote a letter to the congressional leadership right before the law was passed saying this will reduce inflation, because when you reduce the costs of certain things like insulin for seniors, healthcare premiums, that will hopefully help people save money and affect inflation in other ways. And then the actual climate portions of the bill over the long run will reduce inflation. So is it going to be, a total solve? Of course not. Anyone saying that is exaggerating, but it will reduce inflation.
No, but the Republican frame is it's got to solve it all tomorrow. It's got to be done tomorrow, and it's got to be perfect.
And what I would say to that is, what are Republicans doing to address inflation? They've not done a single thing. They've not proposed a single thing. All they're doing is, trying to score political points on it. And instead of, talking about the bill truthfully, that it lowers healthcare costs, that it delivers $20 million to rural America to help fight climate change, that it, invests in communities to try to make things like, electric stovetops more affordable for working class Pennsylvanians. They're just, complaining that it's not a total fix overnight. Nothing would be.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And the one thing that Republicans did do successfully, and you have to give them credit where credit is due, and I want to make sure that people do give Republicans credit for blocking everybody who needs insulin from getting the insulin for no more than $35 a month.
Yeah, it's
They did that.
They did do that, and people like Chuck Grassley, who's a senator from Iowa, are claiming that they support the cap on insulin, even though they voted against it, a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
In theory, they support it.
In theory, and in a way where they don't. It's all garbage, and it's excuses. A vote tells you a lot, and if you're going to vote against something, that's your choice, but be honest about it. People can check the voting record. They can check the Senate floor speeches. One of my colleagues in Iowa went to his town hall where he claimed to support the idea of a cap, and clearly he didn't. And that clip has gone fairly viral on Twitter because people unfortunately now kind of expect hypocrisy from politicians, but it is wild when you're talking about diabetics to be that dishonest. Like, these are people who often have to ration their insulin because it's so expensive, and for no reason. It's not more expensive to make than it was 10 years ago by 2 to 3 times. It's maybe $1. It costs a couple dollars a vial, and they're charging up to $100 in certain cases, and people can't afford that. So
no, $100. I had someone reach out to us, say they were paying $300 a month, for their kids, insulin, and you go, that's just insane, especially because it's been around for so long. How is it that it's this expensive?
It's price gouging. It's just
okay. That's too simple of an answer.
That may be too simple of an answer, but yeah, I think it's the politicians making choices not to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that it's going to be more affordable for seniors with Medicare, but There's a lot of diabetics who are under 65
Yeah.
who are going to have to ration or not pay their rent bill or avoid, maybe skip out on meals just to get life-saving medication. And that's because 43 Republicans voted against lowering the cost.
So where are those people who are slapping, Joe Biden did this stickers all over the place going, Republicans did this? Where's the sticker for that?
Hopefully we'll see one soon coming, from Democrats and their supporters. But yeah, Republicans aren't going to be honest about that. They're going to claim that the bill does things it doesn't do to try to gin up fear and opposition. I don't think it's going to work because there's so clearly nothing unpopular in this bill.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. I mean, this is a big win.
Yeah.
Was it everything? No, but it's still a massive win. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Keean Vackhill. He is a senior reporter at Courier Newsroom, couriernewsroom.com. The website, they're one of the sponsors here at Netroots Nation here in Pittsburgh. You see their name all over the place, getting the name out, and I hope you'll check out their website. Now, again, I go back to this 5 ways Democrats have helped Pennsylvanians. Walk me through some of the ways that you think it's helped here.
Yeah, so, you've got the Inflation Reduction Act. You also then have they're called the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. It's, mostly been talked about as a gun safety bill, and it does include some measures. It'll make it harder for domestic abusers to get guns. There's, a background check now for people, I believe it's under the age of 21. So there's some measures there. But really what it is, it's a mental health bill. It invests $10 billion to expand mental health care in schools and communities all across the country. And that's the largest investment since the Kennedy era, I believe, when you take into consideration inflation. And that's huge. We have a lot of people try to conflate increases in gun violence with poor mental health. And, in some cases that's true. Some of these people do have mental health issues. But in general, people with mental health issues are more likely to be the victims of gun violence. And separating those two is important. And when you look at the mental health portion of this bill, it's groundbreaking. It invests in these sort of wraparound clinics where if you have substance abuse issues, you can go there. If you, are having some sort of mental psychotic episode or something, or you're just really struggling, you can go there and they have to treat you even if you don't have insurance. And they have 24/7 care and call phone lines. And so, we do have a mental health crisis in this country. Healthcare is expensive. If you've ever tried to find a therapist in network, it's pretty much impossible. Yeah. And that's if you have private health insurance. Yeah. So this doesn't solve everything. I don't want it to make it sound like that, but it's a huge step in terms of making care accessible to people who really need it. And so that is going to help Pennsylvanians. You also then have there's the semiconductor bill, which is going to hopefully reduce the cost of things like phones and cars and video game consoles by creating the chips that they require domestically, and that'll also create jobs. So that's going to help Pennsylvanians. We'll see if they build factories here, but I know there are semiconductor factories that make chips in Pennsylvania already. So who knows? Maybe they'll get some of the incentives from that bill. And then of course, rewinding a bit to last year, you've got the infrastructure bill, which funds bridges and roads, clean drinking water. There are still sections of the state where there's lead pipes and people can't get, quality, safe drinking water. So that funding from that bill will help some of those people.
And this is the kind of stuff that the Democrats need to do a better job explaining. Should be telling people this stuff because it's good stuff. It's stuff that people want.
Yeah.
And stuff that people need. And you go, yeah, we did that. Take the victory lap. I say this all the time. Donald Trump was all talk and no action because legislatively they got nothing. Well, they got one thing done. They got massive tax cuts for rich people. That they got done. Check, mission accomplished. But nothing else.
No.
But you got to look at the Biden administration. They're getting all this stuff done. No talk.
Yeah, and that's true. And it's an issue because, Democrats don't have the same ecosystem of media that the right has with Fox News and all these, let's call it propaganda. It's not media, it's propaganda. To just, they can go on every night and spin something. Democrats don't quite have that. And so, but they also just need to find a way to reach people more and talk about this stuff in a way that's simple. Clean drinking water, everyone needs water to survive. That's really simple to understand. If you drive on roads, there are certain roads in this state that are a mess. And so, if those get fixed, that'll prevent potholes. It'll be safer. It'll fewer car accidents. That saves lives. It saves money. That's important. And the same thing, the American Rescue Plan, I'm sure most people have forgotten about it completely because the main...
You mean the thing that caused all this inflation?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, most people, think about, the stimulus checks that were $1,400 and, maybe the unemployment assistance that got extended. But what that bill really did is the untalked about stuff is the investments in communities and long-term in state and local governments that will help fund public services like education, public safety, programs for healthcare, programs for veterans, programs for housing. That money every day, if you Google American Rescue Plan, you'll see funding of some sort. All across this country. And, that's not sexy. No one's it's hard to, persuade people that that's, an electoral winner necessarily, but it's a huge change and impact on people's daily lives.
Yeah, you can't simple-mindedly slap a sticker on it and say Joe Biden did this.
No.
But it actually is making people's lives better. So last question I've got for you. Here at the conference, is this your first Netroots?
It is my first Netroots.
So what do you think, and what do you hoping comes out of this as you guys wrap this up?
So I've been really impressed by sort of the different diversities of experiences and people here. I attended a panel yesterday that was about, how effectively Democrats, need to talk to people and how to reach people and talk about sort of what the Republican agenda. And, I thought it was a really interesting panel. It featured the Democratic Party chair of Wisconsin, Ben Wickler, who's a super smart guy, and, talks about how you need to talk to voters with values and, reach them with your values and then, talk honestly about what the other side is trying to do to those values you cherish, like freedom and freedom to be who you are. And, freedom to learn everything about America's history at school, freedom to earn a living. So it was interesting because I think too often Democrats are on the defensive when there's a political fight going on, and they're trying to, someone said this, but, in a different panel yesterday, it's like, no, critical race theory, they just deny that it's taught. And that's true. But, you're playing on their field now. And so it was interesting to sort of see the different perspectives. And it's been great to just, I'm at our booth in the ballroom back there, and we've had a lot of different people stop by and sign up to learn more information about us. So that's exciting. And what was the back half of your question? I'm sorry.
What are you hoping comes out of this? Clearly, by having people sign up, you want people to go to couriernewsroom.com and become loyal readers and subscribers, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping what will come out of this is, people will pay attention. Yes, we'll sign up to follow us at couriernewsroom.com. And if you're in Pennsylvania, our newsroom is called Keystone Newsroom. I'm going to plug them a little bit. They do great work. But in general, more broadly speaking, I'm hoping, people are focused this year because there's a lot on the line, in November. And I'm not saying that, there's a lot going on politically, and it's not an exaggeration to say that Republicans are targeting freedoms of voting, of, if you're LGBTQ, they're targeting that. If you're a woman, they've taken away the right to abortion in most states in this country, or close to most at least. And, if you are a public school student, Doug Mastriano wants to cut half the funding. If you're a public school teacher, you could lose your job. Like, the freedom to earn a living, the freedom to study, it is, circling back to the first thing we talked about, Mastriano's positions are dangerous. Unless you're, part of his very small minority of supporters who are, maybe don't believe in public education or voting rights, they're going to be reckless and there'll be consequences. No, and that's why I hope, come November, Pennsylvania finds its sanity. But Kia, it was good meeting you, good seeing you. You've been on the program a number of times. Hope you'll come back again real soon. I sure will. Thank you. Good stuff. Kia Valkill, senior reporter over Courier Newsroom, couriernewsroom.com, the website. Make sure you check that out. Our good friends there. Going to take a quick break back here from Netroots Nation here in Pittsburgh. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day 53 construction tradesmen were killed in a fire at the Titan II ICBM launch complex near Searcy, Arkansas. It is considered one of the worst industrial accidents at a U.S. nuclear weapons facility. The complex was one of 4 sites containing Titan II missiles. Each missile weighed 340,000 pounds, measuring 103 feet in length and 10 feet in diameter. President Johnson Wisconsin had just committed more troops to the Vietnam War. The Air Force had hoped to strengthen the silo against a possible Soviet attack. They had contracted with Peter Kiewit and Son of Colorado to bring in electricians, carpenters, millwrights, painters, and pipe fitters for a number of tasks. Crews worked to shore up the silo, improve the blast doors, adjust hydraulics, and install emergency lighting. 52 of the 55 workers on all 9 levels of the silo were almost immediately asphyxiated when it suddenly filled with smoke and heat. The Air Force determined a welder on level 2 had accidentally pierced a high-pressure hydraulic line, igniting the fire. Investigators also concluded that the silo lacked adequate ventilation, alternative exits, and independent power sources. The contractor was held responsible for numerous safety violations, contributing to unsafe work conditions. The welder was found drowned in hydraulic fluid. 2 survivors suffered burns and smoke inhalation. They contested the Air Force's findings. One worker insisted no one had been welding on level 2. The other survivor stated he saw flames burst from the diesel engine just before the power went out. Both men insisted the fire started from below. By 1981, 2 more deadly accidents involving Titan II missiles would prompt President Reagan to order their deactivation.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
From corporate polluters to political bosses, power elites try to create a myth of inevitability, trying to make workaday people feel helpless, too small to change the injustices of the system. Don't bother is their message. But the feisty residents of Boxtown, Tennessee definitely did bother when they learned that a couple of profiteering fossil fuel giants were targeting them. Boxtown, a historic black neighborhood of Memphis settled by former slaves 160 years ago, was considered by Valero Energy and Plains All-American Pipeline to be politically powerless. So when these multi-billion-dollar petro-powers decided to ram a dirty and dangerous pipeline through the Memphis area, Boxtown was their chosen route. The rich Texas oil barons even sneeringly called the lower-income community the point of least resistance. Boy, did they get that wrong. Those, quote, small people of Boxtown resisted fiercely and smartly. Most flat out refused to sell their family land at the thieving price offered by the oil slicks. They forged a unified grassroots coalition, Memphis Community Against the Pipeline, reached out to other neighborhoods and educated locals about the terrible safety records of the 2 corporate plunderers. They also enlisted environmental groups to help beat back the strong-arm attempt by Valero and Plains All-American to seize the people's property through eminent domain. It's a long story with many ups and downs, but the inspiring essence of it is that local, quote, nobodies defeated the big money and raw racist arrogance of a powerhouse duo of absentee corporate elites that disrespected and misjudged them. This is Jim Hightower saying grassroots communities and coalitions are winning such gutsy fights against corporate exploiters all across America. Remember this, even the smallest dog can lift its leg on the tallest building.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, spending a little time here on Radio Row here at Netroots Nation in Pittsburgh, as we've been for the last day and a half. One of the things that I've loved about coming to these things is over the years you get to meet people who do the same kind of work that you do in different parts of the country, and it's really exciting to come together and talk about the work that you do and the audiences and the topics and all that. And that's why I'm thrilled to sit down with Egberto Willies. He's host of the Politics Done Right program down in Houston. Egberto, thanks for taking time for us.
Man, it's my honor to be with the Rick Smith Show. You know, it is like being at home. You know what I mean?
I appreciate that.
Being at home. So thank you so kindly for having me on your program, my friend.
It is great to see you again. In fact, the last time we talked to each other was in Philly a couple years ago.
Yes.
It seems we only get together during these moments. We should do more together.
Absolutely so. So we'll have you on doing my thing sometime. The good thing about it is we can do it through Zooms as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think of the conference so far, and how does this one compare to maybe past years? Any thoughts?
Well, I'm going to tell you. you, it's better than I hoped it would be, because I know with COVID still going around and a lot of folks are still fearful. I didn't quite know what the attendance or the physical attendance was going to be, and it's not what it's normal, but it still have the core kind of folk that we expect at a Net
You got the
Roots
energy.
Nation. The energy is here.
No, and that's fabulous. So let's talk about where you're at. Texas, well, you got a crazy governor, crazy attorney general. You got crazy everything.
Everybody, all our leaders in Texas that are running Texas right now are crazy. And the problem is Texas didn't elect them. A crazy part of Texas did. In other words, the people people look at Texas as like, you guys are crazy, and I live in Texas, and I know the people in Texas, and the people that I know in Texas aren't the ones who elected him, and the majority of people in Texas aren't the ones who elected the governor, the lieutenant governor, Patrick, and none of those folks were actually elected by most of the people. What we have in Texas is a population that is encouraged not to vote. Voting is made relatively difficult in certain areas, and they know what areas to make voting difficult. You know, the areas where people have to work, so they don't. Yeah, you can vote 2 or 3 weeks before the election, but if you have to work every day of the week and the hours are during working hours, in as much as you have all of that, you don't get people to vote, so you get the candidates that we have. So what we're doing is pushing in Texas. We're trying to increase the knowledge in Texas with the people, giving them the shows. And the good thing about it is they hear all kind of shows. So get out there. This time you have to make the sacrifice to vote, because we really need to start voting your interest. Not what they're telling you, but vote in your interest. So we hope that even if we don't do it this time around, that it's going to come close. Beto is running a very effective campaign. I hope he continues to do so, because we still have a lot of ground to make up between now and November.
You think he's got a chance?
Nobody does. I think he does. And nobody think he has a chance. In fact, the pollsters are writing it off, and I always tell them, likely voter model is no longer relevant. We are in different times right now, and Kansas proved it. The likely voter model in Kansas was so off. Even the registered voter model in Kansas didn't do too well. I mean, that was a landslide. When people start to think for themselves, I mean, it's easy to turn on Fox News or even any one of these things and just listen and not think. On my show, and as I'm sure on your show as well, you don't want folks just taking your words for it. You want them to have faith in you after they've corroborated what you've said.
Right.
And then later they can have faith in you after you've proven yourself. Too many people have not done that in other domains. I think people are starting to get there. And I think Kansas is probably a good template, because those are people who are watching Fox News. So they actually said, maybe I should do a little thinking for myself now.
Well, what they saw is it's coming for me. And this is one of those moments
wow, that's it.
Where it's one thing to attack the others.
Yes.
But when you realize that the attacks are coming towards me,
right.
I think, especially with in this post-Roe world, I think a lot of people are reevaluating the Republicans and some of the things that they're doing, going, maybe they are coming for me.
You just hit the magic. They're coming for me. And, as progressives, I think what we have to let folks realize is it's not only the abortion issue that's coming for you. It's all these other issues that we think, it is funny. They always talk about they want to raise your taxes. And when we cut taxes, we have to make folks actually start understanding that those things that you think that they've made you believe you don't want actually is coming for you as well.
Yeah, no, they're losing their minds right now over.
Right.
They're hiring 87,000 IRS agents, and they're going to kick in your door. And
right.
No, they're going to go after rich people to finally make them pay their taxes, so we can invest in roads and bridges, in education and healthcare, and the things that we've been denied for the last 40 years.
And Brother Rick, that's the message. You're giving that message. I'm giving that message, but enough of our liberal media isn't giving that message.
Is there a liberal media out there?
That's my point.
Where is that?
You are.
Am I?
Yeah.
I'm a working class guy.
No, what I'm saying is when we talk about, I'm not talking about liberal and necessarily the definite sense. I'm talking in liberal as policies. You want health care, I consider that liberal. You want the working man to have a living wage. You want the working man to say, if I'm working for this corporation, I should be a part of this corporation. You want all those good things. They like to call it the liberal stuff. Let's adapt it. It's the liberal stuff. But we are the one preaching it most of the times. And a lot of times in the big media intelligentsia, we don't get that.
No, you're right. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right. You want to check out his website, egbertowillies.com. We'll get links out on social media. He's also the author of numerous books, As I See It, It's Worth It, and How to Make America Utopia. You're quite a prolific author, you are.
Well, I don't call it prolific. I just call it a madman. And the reason I say that is when I get mad about something, I write about it. In other words, when I wrote As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, it was like, my God, folks, understand that this stuff is not about race. This stuff is not about all these issues. It's a class thing. Race is the tool. Yep. All these other issues are the tools. So I went ahead and explained the presidencies from Reagan and how Reagan started this new thing, it's a new thing again, and going down and explained what economics really looked like and how patent systems and all of that affected us all. So it's an easy book to understand, easy read, but I wanted to put it in a manner that somebody could pick up the book and say, okay, I understand it now. What those guys at MSNBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, or all these places, I can actually relate to it and not allow that guy on the right to really snow me by not understanding these concepts, by just saying, okay, I better believe him because he knows better. Then I came up with, it's worth it. Hey, if we're going to win, you're a working class hero. That's what your T-shirt says. As a working class hero, we got to say, hey, my Republican brother here, he doesn't understand that we are on the same team. I'm working class, he's working class. We should be looking at the same issues. Don't let them separate us by right, left, and all that kind of stuff because you think it's going to make it. No, the reality is you and I are in the same thing. Oprah Winfrey is having dinner with Donald Trump.
Yep.
Okay?
No, I say it all the time. It's not right or left. It's up, down.
There you go. And the last book I wrote was How to Make America Utopia. I believe in, if you're going to try to talk to somebody, if you're going to convince somebody or something, you don't just tell them what's wrong. You tell them, okay, but there's a solution. We can do this together to actually get ahead. And that's the whole deal. So like I said, each time that I thought things weren't doing, I went ahead and wrote a book.
Good for you, and I hope folks, where can we get them?
You can go ahead and go to politicsdoneright.com/books. politicsdoneright.com/books and pick up any one of these. And let me tell you, it's written in an easy to understand manner, and I guarantee you, even your right-wing brother would like that book.
There you go. Your stuff in the stocking come Christmas time. Yeah. No, because you hit an interesting point, and it's something that we talk about in this program all the time. What the wealth class has done masterfully is slice and dice us and pit us against each other so that they can rob us blind. It's not black-white. It's not. That's not the division. The color that matters has always been green.
Yes.
That's always been the important color.
I have this stuff now where I call us antiseptic. We are all now antiseptic slaves. I have this thing on my show where I said, hey, slavery used to look like this. You see my color, man? That's what it used to be. But let me tell you something, brothers and sisters. Now, I don't care what the hell you guys want to call me or whatever. We're brothers and sisters, and even if you don't like me, I'm going to like you because I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you this. We are all in the boat, and it's a cliche, but the reality is from the inception of this country, the deal was this. I had to keep you guys separated so that some of us, those of us in the capital class, can take it all. And anytime you guys get together and realize that that's it, that's happening, I try to break you up. Trump was that on steroids to break us up because we are in fact coming together as a real country. We were in fact coming together, and they couldn't take it, and they couldn't take it that all of us was going to live in harmony. They had to break it.
So are you excited about this moment where you're seeing a lot of union organizing? You're seeing a lot of organizing in maybe non-traditional spaces?
I simply love it because I love that it's dispersed. I love that it's people from the ground up. I spoke to Rob from Op-Ed News. I always
Call.
forget. Yeah, Rob Call from Op-Ed News. And, he wrote a book called Bottom Up that I think everybody should also read as well. When things start to happen from the bottom up, when the individual start to see that, why am I doing the work? And that guy, executive, we praise the executive. I am sorry.
The captains of industry, the
That's
titans of
bull.
industry. Yeah.
That's bull. It's not their intellect, it's not their labor, and it's not their efficiency that did things. We did it. And they are parasites. The vast majority of executives in corporations, by the definition of the word parasite, they are parasites. Rick, what you're doing to enlighten folks and let folks know what's going on, to empower them, well, I've learned not to use empower, to let them realize that they are empowered, that is where it's at.
No, it is. And it's where we've got to wake up to the moment, because I'm thrilled and guardedly optimistic that things could change, given the fact that you're seeing people lifting their heads and saying,
Yes.
I want something better.
Yeah, actually, I am. You said you're guarded optimistic.
Yeah.
I am optimistic because you know what I see, brother? We make the optimism. We are the ones that are going to make that optimism.
Yeah, no, I'm still guardedly optimistic because look, while we've outprocreated the
Yes.
wealth class, they've
Yes.
still got all the money.
Yes.
And we've got the best democracy money can buy.
Yes.
Because look, the reality is you talk to the average citizen. They want health care. They want
Yes.
good education. We want good roads and bridges. We want safe neighborhoods.
Yes.
We want all of these things. We don't seem to legislate so much on those grounds. We get tax cuts for rich people. I don't
Yes.
know anybody who goes, that's a great idea. That gets through.
Yes.
I got a problem with that.
A little secret. Even the new bill that just passed that I support because we have to start somewhere. If you take a look at all the benefits that go out there, and this is what I'm going to be placing on my show pretty soon, it's that it supports people who they know vote.
And what's that? The Inflation Reduction Act?
The Inflation Reduction Act. Things like green energy and all of that is great, but we have to do it more. It supports a lot of people that's going to go buy electric cars and all of that, but most of the folks in the middle of Brooklyn are not going to be buying electric cars.
Right.
So we have to. First of all, we have to support it. We have to show that it's really inflationary for that grandmother who's not going to spend $5,000 on drugs, but $2,000. That is a super reduction in the inflation rate for her.
Yep.
So we have to sell it that way, but at the same time, we have to realize and tell folks, you want a better bill? Vote for the people who are going to give you a better bill.
No, that's it. No, look, my position's been kind of like yours. It's a huge win.
Yes.
You got a huge win. Is it everything that we ever wanted
No.
in a slice of bread? No. And that's why we wake up tomorrow and we organize for better for tomorrow.
Absolutely. I'm with you.
So last line of questioning I've got for you, looking here at the conference here at Netroots Nation here in Pittsburgh, coming out of this, it's always great to see people come
Yeah.
together, activists coming together and organizing for where they want to go. What do you think's going to come out of this? What are you hoping comes out of this? What direction do you see?
Great. Let me tell you what I saw. I saw people interacting with each other. I saw people exchanging information. I saw people learning from. Let me tell you. For me, I came here to interview a lot of people, and I can tell you that for every single person that I've interviewed, I've learned something, and I've made a connection.
Yep.
So it's important. The learning was bi-directional, but mostly to me. I learned from the folks that I interviewed. I learned things that I need to cover on my program. I learned different techniques that I need to use based on what they are doing. So I think for us here on Radio Row, we should use all these people that are visiting with us as learning experiences and to promote the message as they've learned, as they've done what they've done.
Good stuff. Egberto, I appreciate you sitting down, spending a couple of minutes with me. I wish you the best.
Thank you so kindly for having me on your show, Rick.
Good stuff. Egberto Willies. Make sure you check out his website, egbertowillies.com. Also, the program Politics Done Right. Make sure you check that out. We'll get links out on social media, how you can do that. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today. Thanks for tuning in to The Rick Smith Show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Rick Smith Show, like us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all that and much more at thericksmithshow.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back here to Netroots Nation. We're at the David Lawrence Conference Center in Pittsburgh, as we've been talking about all day. One of the questions that keeps coming up is what makes a good candidate, especially as, November is coming around, and, how do we save democracy? High-minded stuff, how do we rebuild a prosperous working class? How do we rebuild the American dream? How do we do all that stuff? Well, my next guest, she's got the answers. That's why I've asked Stephanie Taylor to come talk with us. She's the co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. You can check out their work at boldprogressives.org. Stephanie, thanks for sitting down with us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So let's start with the candidate thing. What makes a good candidate?
What makes a good candidate? So we support candidates all over the country. We tend to support about 1,000 candidates each cycle, school board to Senate. And I will tell you the number one thing that people are looking for, they're looking for authenticity. They are looking for people who, deep in their gut, are on the side of working people, not corporations, and people who get that the system is rigged and are willing to acknowledge that our institutions are failing us, our institutions are broken, and that they're going to go in there and fight to do something about it.
Yeah, having an actual agenda and not being about the individual. Sadly, I know a lot of people who get into running for something, and it's about them. Yeah. And it really isn't about the individual. It's not being the first this or that. It's about how are you going to make people's lives better? How are you going to make the lives of your constituents better, your community better? How are you going to change the world? Yeah. Your little piece of it at the start.
Yep, that's right. We say a lot. We talk about the kitchen table test, which is when people are sitting at their kitchen table late at night, looking at a stack of bills in front of them. They're worrying about, what do I pay first this month? The heating bill? Do I pay off my credit card debt? Are you speaking to that? Are you letting them know that you get it, that you get that the pressures that working people are under in this country, and you're going to actually do something about it?
Yeah, I'm with you. Now, we've heard a lot, especially at this conference, about democracy and saving democracy, especially after the orange period in our country. There was that 4-year stint that seems to be bleeding over into these last couple of years. How do we save democracy, since it does appear? I mean, I look here in my state of Pennsylvania that we've got a guy running for governor who I believe is a pure fascist and would destroy democracy in this state. How do we save this?
Oh, yeah. I'm in Pennsylvania also, and I'm terrified about Mastriano. But, yeah, we have to, well, 2 things, I believe. We have to run more candidates who are, again, authentic, who are speaking to the worries of everyday Americans, and who also are willing to say the institutions are broken and we're going to fix them. We have too many Democrats that defend institutions, that are saying, everything's working fine. We just have to keep going the way we're going. No, the institutions are broken. The Supreme Court is broken. Electoral College, broken system. The Senate is broken. Let's get people in there that are willing to take these on, to fix them, and really take on the corporate capture of our democracy. But number 2, we have to be prepared that there are people who are running for office right now. You brought up Mastriano. There's people all over the country running for governor, running for Secretary of State. These people are existential threats to democracy, and we have to be prepared in 2024 to really fight to make sure that we still have a democracy.
But what do you say to the people? Look, this is democracy. There are folks who are running on a platform of destroying democracy, and there are people who say, no, we don't want this. We want, whatever, authoritarian kind of fascist rule that they would bring us. What do you say to that argument?
Well, you know, when you're overthrowing election results, that's anti-democratic, right? but yeah, I mean, one of the things we believe very much is that, for instance, we need to expand the Supreme Court because we.
Do you think that's possible?
Well, it should be.
Okay.
I mean, we should do it, and there's a couple really good bills out there. One, I would ask people to check out Ro Khanna's bill on term limits for Supreme Court judges, because I think it's a really nice solution to how you deal with the fact that you have a bunch of folks who have lifetime appointments and who are on the Supreme Court and have decided that they're basically an unelected tribunal that gets to decide for the rest of us what laws we're going to live under, and that's not how it works.
Right.
And
So on the expand the court problem, here's my problem with the expand the court argument. I know the other side eventually will come back to power. What stops them from expanding it to swing things back to the other? And we end up swinging back and forth in this kind of electoral fashion. What would stop that until eventually we end up with 1,000 justices?
And so be it.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. But seriously,
that would be democracy, I guess.
Seriously, here's the problem: is that a lot of times that's an argument you hear from Democrats. A lot of times, well, if we do this, if we get rid of the filibuster, if we expand the court, if we use our power, what's going to stop the Republicans from doing the same thing? The thing is, they already run roughshod over our institutions. They already do whatever they want. They already don't respect norms when they have power. When McConnell gets power again and he wants to do something that he can't do you think he's going to keep the filibuster for 1 minute?
Nope.
You know, and so I think it's just, the answer is just you can't worry about what the other guys are going to do, because they're going to do whatever they want. And right now we have to worry about how do we wrestle back a Supreme Court that is sort of announced to the world with the Dobbs decision. We don't care what the majority wants. We don't care. We're just going to say how it's going to be, and the rest of you are going to have to live with it. You know, 70% of Americans don't agree with the Dobbs decision. The vast majority of people in this country want to see legal abortion, but yet we have a Supreme Court that's ruling otherwise.
Yeah, our six in robes, they know better.
Right.
And that's scary. And look, there are a lot of other things, whether, you're talking about women's rights, you're talking about workers' rights, you're talking about consumer rights, you're talking, just basic citizens' rights, all of that because of this court under attack. And from a labor perspective, I'm very concerned what the future has to hold. And I know you, as a former union organizer, I'm sure you see it as well. The things that they're going to do are going to return us back to the days of the Lochner era.
Oh, yeah. I think that they are a profoundly pro-corporate, anti-worker court, and we should all be really scared about it. And we were just talking before the interview about how we need to rebuild the labor movement in this country, and that requires laws that allow us to do that.
So how do we begin, outside of going to boldprogressives.org and becoming involved in the work that you do? And you're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Stephanie Taylor. She's the co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, boldprogressives.org, their website, if you want to check that out. Outside of going to that website, what do you want people doing?
Exactly. You can come to the website. You can volunteer for local candidates, volunteer for great local candidates, chip in for local candidates, get involved supporting great local candidates. But also, if you feel driven, if you feel the calling, running for office yourself. We should be contesting every election everywhere. And you need folks that are able to speak to regular people and get their lived reality, get what it is to be a working person in this country, staring at that stack of bills on your kitchen table late at night and willing to say, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to fight to do something about it, I'm going to fight to level this playing field. If you feel like that, you're that kind of person, run for office.
And being able to speak is an important thing.
Yep.
Something I struggle with quite often. But Stephanie, I appreciate you taking time for us. Hope folks will go to boldprogressives.org and check out the work you do and participate.
Thank you so much.
Good stuff, Stephanie. It's Stephanie Taylor, co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. Make sure you check out their website, boldprogressives.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The bill I'm about to sign is not just about today, it's about tomorrow. It's about delivering progress and prosperity to American families.
Inflation Reduction Act's landmark climate action is now the law of the land, as
the worst drought in 1,200 years has water managers in 7 states, 30 tribal nations, and Mexico fighting over every precious drop.
Western states hit with unprecedented water cuts, and
science and the data leads us to now understand that we will lose 10% of our water supply by 2040.
California proposes big changes amid historic drought.
All of that history and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment. Today, courtesy of climate and energy journalist David Roberts, who tweeted recently, quote, "Every few minutes I repeat to myself in a quiet voice, it's okay. Joe Manchin can't hurt you anymore." No, he can't, David. It's okay. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, very big news. We've been talking about it for weeks, months, actually years, but
yes.
The U.S. has finally passed and signed a major climate bill.
Yes, President Biden signed the Democrats' landmark climate, healthcare, and tax reform bill into law on Tuesday, with the largest single investment in climate action in U.S. history. $370 billion in investments to speed up the transition to clean energy and tackle climate change.
Now, we should note $370 billion is a lot of money, but it is spread over 10 years, and really, we need to do a lot more.
Oh, yes, it is most definitely not enough. In remarks at the signing, Biden drew a sharp contrast between Democrats and Republicans.
And remember, every single Republican, every single one, voted against tackling the climate crisis, against lowering our energy costs, against creating good-paying jobs.
Not only did every Republican vote no, but on the House floor, several Republicans called climate science a hoax, even as Americans are suffering amid one of the hottest summers in U.S. history. Last month set a new record for the hottest overnight temperatures on average, which are linked to an increase in heat deaths. And a new survey finds nearly 40% of U.S. farmers are plowing under their own crops and selling off cattle because of extreme drought. The bill also contains $5 billion in new funding for drought mitigation in southwestern states. Federal water managers this week announced a new round of mandatory water cuts for the 7 states that rely on the Colorado River because water levels are plummeting due to the historic mega drought in the U.S. West. The urgent action protects 2 major dams from structural damage after states failed to reach an agreement among themselves. Starting in January, Arizona will lose 1/5 of its river allocation. Nevada, 8%. Mexico, 7%. California won't see cuts until the next phase of the drought response. The feds will implement other actions to shore up supplies in the new system while a new agreement is negotiated.
So this agreement has been in place for years, but this is the first time it's actually had to be triggered?
Yes. Arizona and Nevada water agencies are not happy about the cuts, and they are demanding that other states, California, do more to preserve the river.
Hey, it's our water. We got there first.
Speaking of falling water levels, a 5th set of human remains has been found in the rapidly declining Lake Mead Reservoir near Las Vegas.
A 5th set of remains?
Yes, even while Vegas is experiencing its wettest monsoon season in years that is flooding streets and casinos.
So that ought to fill up Lake Mead a little bit, no?
Not even close.
Oh.
In California, Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom has proposed sweeping new measures to increase the state's water supply amid the mega drought.
We're going to steal more water from the Colorado?
The $8 billion plan calls for upgrading the state's entire water system to increase efficiency with new infrastructure for water storage and stormwater capture, groundwater management, increased recycling and reuse, and desalination plants.
There's plenty of water that flows through that just flows right out, that we can reuse, that is high quality, safe, and affordable. And so it's, again, about just being a little bit more resourceful and provide us more capacity to balance the needs as an ag state so that we're not going at each other, urban versus ag.
I don't know. Dick Cheney said you can't conserve your way out of a crisis.
Finally, some great news in Massachusetts. Republican Governor Charlie Baker signed a sweeping climate and energy bill into law with major provisions to boost offshore wind energy, decarbonize Boston's transit system, allow cities to ban fossil fuel appliances in new buildings, and require all new cars sold in Massachusetts to be zero emissions by 2035.
Well, that's that. I guess Charlie Baker is going to have to be thrown out of the Republican Party. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So spending a little time in the exhibit hall here at Netroots Nation in Pittsburgh. And remember, check out the work that they're doing here at netrootsnation.org, the website, if you want to follow along. One of the more interesting exhibits I came across was the Old Pros Online exhibit. Sex workers, yep, legalizing, decriminalizing. Not quite sure where we're going with that, but I said, maybe something would be worth a conversation. That's why I've asked Caitlin Bailey to come talk with us. She's the founder and executive director of Old Pros Online, their website, oldprosonline.org. Seriously, check that one out. But Caitlin, thanks for taking some time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I got to tell you, one of the more interesting exhibits, a lot of people, selling data processing software and how to get volunteers for this or that. Little more titillating, little more interesting, how to make sex work legal.
Sure. Well, we are absolutely interested in removing criminal penalties around sex work. We're a little bit nervous around legalization or regulation or the sort of licensing schemes. Nevada is a really good example of this. Nevada is the only state in the union with legal and regulated prostitution. It has the highest arrest rate per capita for prostitution-related offenses, and it's a model that really only benefits brothel owners at the detriment of both workers and clients alike.
So what would be the ideal work conditions? Because I got to tell you,
Sure.
let's start in this place. Because I know a lot of people are going, wait a second, do we really want streetwalkers on every corner? Do we really want this kind of environment? Because we're a puritanical country, right?
Sure.
Churches on every corner. Do we want prostitutes out in front of the churches?
Whether we want, sex workers to be in our communities or not, we have always been integral members of communities, and we always will be, right? Sex work is older than money. So I think it's important to recognize, sex work, it's a lot like sex. You might have opinions about the kinds of sexual activities that your neighbors are engaged in, but to try to, regulate it or police it leads us to a really dark place. We've been there before. The criminalization of, the LGBTQ plus community, it doesn't go anywhere good.
Yeah, I always go back to, there's a George Carlin saying for everything.
Sure.
And the reality is, why is it illegal to sell something that's perfectly legal to give away?
Right. Yeah.
So I've always come down on that side of things, and I never understood that. So why is it that we've made it illegal? Why
I think it all comes back to, our impulse, maybe a fetish for controlling women. The way that we police prostitution in this country is we police where women go, what they wear, and who they associate with. The Dobbs decision that just came down from the Supreme Court tells us that we are really not over trying to control the reproductive bodies of women. And so, policing prostitution, I think, is really patriarchy more than it is any form of protection.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, I'm listening to you, and I'm with you. I got two daughters. The last thing I want is them to be in that world.
Sure.
Because I think we all have this vision of what sex work is, and maybe you can help me figure out what is and where we
Sure.
this is.
Sex work is
because we're dirty, seedy, nasty kind of back room.
So there's a lot of value judgment coming. Rick, sex work is a really broad spectrum.
Exactly, and that's why you're here to help me work
Sure.
through this.
But I also, Rick, I think you can admit that there is a long list of professions, many legal, that you wouldn't want your daughters engaged in, right? Like, how would you feel about your daughters, I don't know, joining the Army or working at a slaughterhouse, right? I mean, there are definitely, grimy professions that
Absolutely.
take a lot out of the folks that engage with them. And I think that we can stand together, right, for workers and against exploitation, regardless of the kind of labor that folks are engaged in, right?
Right.
And erotic labor is no exception. All people engage in all work on a spectrum of choice, circumstance, and coercion. So there are absolutely people that are called to this work, right? There are tantric sex healers. There are people that engaged in, sexual healing work. There was a fantastic documentary, The Sessions, about a sex therapist that worked with disabled folks. She had a master's degree in sex education, but she was doing sort of like skin-to-skin contact, right? Something that would absolutely be described as sex work. Then there are folks that are driven to this work because they, need to make rent, right? They need to feed their kids. They would rather be doing other things, but, because of, barriers to access or, there is a myriad of circumstances on why they wouldn't be able to engage in other work. And like other forms of labor in this country, there are people that are coerced into this work, right? By an abusive boyfriend,
Yep.
right? By an abusive landlord, right? And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that regardless of what brings you to this work, nobody is benefited by putting in handcuffs and being saddled with a criminal record.
No,
This
I'm right
is
there with
not
you.
a problem that we can arrest our way out of.
No, but when you think of sex work, at least when I do, and I'm not generalizing for everyone, I think exploitation. I think a lot of negative things that I don't want for my daughters.
That's by design. Are you familiar with the white slave myth or the white slave narrative from the 19th century? Yeah. So this comes out of the sort of the progressive era in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But it was a propaganda campaign on behalf of progressives who really sort of designed vice departments as we know it today. And they were targeting immigrant communities. They were targeting sort of recently emancipated black communities. And they were really reacting to this idea of white middle-class women joining the workforce and engaging in, public space for the first time in the late 1870s. And so Anthony Comstock, who wrote our first obscenity laws, the Comstock laws, conflated contraception with obscenity and criminalized both, right? So it was just as illegal, right, to have sort of a titillating peep show as it was to give somebody medically accurate information about their bodies or how to prevent pregnancy. And so we created this myth that historians have widely debunked, right? There was never a moment in our nation's history where white middle-class women were being kidnapped, right, by immigrants or by black men, right, or by Native men. That was a figment of the sort of like white middle-class imagination, and we used that sort of injected fear to create the way that we police prostitution today. Yeah. And like the sort of pimp figure that we have in sex work, this idea of like an abusive male manager, is the direct result of criminalization. Before criminalization, the overwhelming majority of sex work took place in brothels that were run and often owned by women, right? Madams were the largest landowners in the West for decades, right? But after the criminalization of prostitution, when you empower law enforcement to arrest women on the suspicion of promiscuity, right, it becomes very dangerous for women to be walking alone, eating alone, making the wrong kind of eye contact with a police officer. And so you need the pimp figure in order to procure clients, not to protect women from, abusive clients, but to protect women from the police. And if you talk to sex workers, law enforcement has always been our top predator.
Now, I've heard that over and over again. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Caitlin Bailey, founder and executive director of Old Pros Online. She's also the host of the Oldest Profession podcast. I'm absolutely going to check that out. Check out their website, oldprosonline.org. So, in the perfect world, where do you see? Where would you want things to go? I mean,
in the perfect world.
And how do you allay the fears of people like me who are,
Sure.
Who can you see the concerns that people have about about their kids getting into this kind of thing?
I think that we have a lot of anxieties around our children, engaging in any kind of sex, right? And we've done a lot of dumb things, right?
Because I think we've been beaten up as kids as well. Because
Sure.
I put sex and work together. I don't want them to go. It just doesn't seem right.
Erotic labor is like a lot of other forms of labor, and there are, it's. I think it's important to recognize that there are lots of jobs out there that are not good and not healthy for everyone, right? Like I, for example, could never work in a slaughterhouse, right? My father joined the Army at the age of 17, which I think is too young to make the decision to, kill people professionally for money. But I think that we put sex in this special category, and especially, you mentioned daughters. I don't know if you have sons or not, but I don't hear that same kind of anxiety about boys. And so, I think it's important to interrogate that idea. Is it that you don't want your daughters engaging in sex work, or is it that you don't want your daughters engaging in sex, or is it that you don't want them to be exploited and victimized by a society exactly that weaponizes eroticism against women? Decriminalizing sex work increases the negotiating power of people that engage in this work. Sex workers have the same goals as everyone. We want to live in safe and healthy communities. And when we call off the hunt, right, when we remove the fear of being arrested, right, when we are no longer members of a criminalized class, we can report domestic abusers. We can report violent clients. We can report violent and predatory police officers. We can take the necessary steps to protect ourselves from STIs and to keep ourselves healthy. We want to be doing all of that, but as a member of a criminalized class, we can't. So whether or not your daughters engage in sex work or not, they are the beneficiaries of living in safer and healthier communities when we free sex workers to fully participate in the communities we're already a part of.
Now, before we began the interview, you went through a pretty long list of how making sex work not just legal, but decriminalized would be beneficial to people who don't engage in this. And I thought that was really, really an interesting argument you made.
Thank you.
Can you redo that again?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Sex workers, we want to be able to report. We want to be able to report abusers. Right. So sex workers, because we're a member of a criminalized class, because we're a member of a stigmatized class.
No, I got that part.
Right. We're more likely to be victimized by domestic abusers, predatory police officers, serial killers, serial rapists. When you release us from that fear, right? When our work is decriminalized, we can report those people to law enforcement. We can report those people to our communities. We can make our communities safer by being able to talk about the predators that are operating within them. But when we conflate all clients, right, with violent abusers, then we can't do that anymore. That's no longer serving us. Sex workers want to increase access to medically accurate sex education and engage in a wide variety of harm reduction work, right? We are out there advocating, right, for the monkeypox vaccine to try to protect the communities that we're already a part of from getting that terrible disease, right? The AIDS epidemic was another example of sex workers advocating not just for our own safety and health, but for the safety and health of our communities. And I will also tell you that a society that polices prostitution is policing where women go, what they wear, and who they associate with. And so your daughters living in a society that aggressively polices prostitution is actually more vulnerable, right, to being extorted by a predatory police officer, right, whether she engages in sex work or not, having her social media or harm reduction, if she's interested in talking about sexual health, right, maybe your daughter wants to post on Instagram about how upset she is about the Dobbs decision, taking away her right to decide whether or not she becomes a mother. In a society that polices prostitution, that's more likely to be shadow banned because we incentivize platforms, right, to censor all information about women's bodies. And this goes back to that very old conflation, right, talking about the Comstock laws of conflating information about contraception with obscenity. So a society that polices prostitution is actually a society that is suppressing the freedom of movement and freedom of expression of women.
Interesting. Outside of going to oldprosonline.org to get information about the work that you do as founder and executive director of Old Pros Online, how do you plan on making this possible?
Sex workers.
What do you want people doing?
Sure. So I think you asked before, and I wasn't sure if I fully answered the question. To decriminalize sex work means to remove criminal penalties from buying, selling, and facilitating sexual services. We don't want anyone arrested, evicted, fired, or losing custody of their children just for engaging in this work. We want to change the status of sex workers in society, not only our legal status so that we are no longer criminalized, but also our social status so that we can lend our wisdom and that we can fully participate in public discourse. We have so much to add to conversations about drug use, mental health, housing insecurity, childcare. Sex workers are brilliant, really, and because of the stigmatized and criminalized nature of our work, we cannot share that wisdom with the communities that we're already in. Sex workers are self-organizing all over the country. There are a ton of bills right now that are being proposed. Legislators are starting to listen to sex workers in places like New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Vermont, Oregon, Washington, Louisiana, even D.C., our nation's capital, at a 14-hour hearing on the issue of whether or not to decriminalize sex work. Voters in Burlington, Vermont voted overwhelmingly. Over 60% of the electorate decided to remove sexist language that criminalized prostitution from their laws. So this is absolutely something that's happening. What we do at Old Pros is we try to, we produce media. We are trying to engage in culture change and try to help folks like you understand this issue and why it matters.
Yeah, the old people.
It's, folks that have never engaged in this work or don't know that they already know and probably like somebody who is engaged in this work.
Yeah, but I think most people, sex is for over here.
Sure.
And over here, and everybody else stay over there.
I mean, we live in a society, right? And so, in a society, people have sex with each other. That's a thing that happens.
Yeah, but we don't tell each other usually.
Sure, and sex workers aren't necessarily interested in shoving their work in your face. We just would like to be able to, we'd like to be able to use the message boards that we built and developed over years to schedule and screen our clients. We'd like to be able to engage in sex in the privacy of our own homes or hotel rooms. We're having sex in places where other people are also having sex. That's what we do.
There you go. No, that's a great thing. And look, while I don't know where I'm at.
Well,
I want people to be safe.
Sure.
I don't want the people to be exploited.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I come down to. I want people to...
Well, then it sounds like you support the decriminalization of sex work, and you stand with the World Health Organization, Amnesty International, the ACLU, and other human rights organizations that recognize that the only way to reduce violence and exploitation in the sex industry is by removing criminal penalties, because it is impossible to help people that you're hunting.
There you go. oldprosonline.org, the website. There you'll find the work that Caitlin and her organization do. Highly suggested. Also, the podcast. Make sure you check this out. Oldest Profession Podcast. Real quick, tell me about the podcast.
Yeah,
what do we find there?
Sure. The Oldest Profession Podcast, every episode we do a deep dive into a different sex worker from history. We've partnered with historian Dr. Charlene Fletcher. Every episode comes with an annotated bibliography, and we talk about, the sex workers that have always been contributing members of their communities. We talk about Lou Graham, who funded the Seattle school system. We talk about Lou Graham, who funded public schools in Seattle in the 1890s, right? We talk about the sex workers on Water Street in New Hampshire that helped, fund various charities and sort of dealt with the, folks that were down on their luck. We talk about we go way back to ancient history, but more recently we're sort of focused on the sex workers that have been erased from history that still helps shape the society and the world that we live in today.
Wow, I can just hear the right wing losing their mind as we speak, because maybe next election cycle it's not going to be CTE, it's going to be STE or something. But Caitlin, I appreciate the time you're taking for us, the work you do. Good on you. Hope folks will take a look at the oldprosonline.org website. Caitlin Bailey, thanks so much for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for talking.
Good stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Are you all in favor of decriminalizing, in favor of legalizing? Where are you at? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day that a committee of the industrial workers of the world in Spokane, Washington, published the first edition of the Little Red Songbook. The collection were songs to fan the flames of discontent. Perhaps more than any other labor organization in the United States, members of the IWW understood the power of art to tell the workers' stories. IWW members created music, visual art, and writing to draw people to the cause of labor and to build solidarity among workers. Richard Brazier was an IWW musician who served on the Spokane committee that compiled the collection. He explained, "What first attracted me to the IWW was its songs and the gusto with which its members sang them. Such singing, I thought, was good propaganda, since it had originally attracted me, and many others as well, and also useful, since it held the crowd for wobbly speakers who followed." The original Little Red Songbook included songs such as Solidarity Forever and the French song The Internationale. 30 editions of the pocket-sized book were published between 1909 and 1995. They have included labor songs from musicians such as Joe Hill, Ralph Chaplin, and T-Bone Slim. John Reed, a former IWW journalist, reflected on the organization's powerful connection to music. He wrote, "Remember, this is the only American working class movement which sings. Tremble then at the IWW, for a singing movement is not to be beaten." Do you have a favorite labor song?
Solidarity forever.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. When the
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Remember, if you miss any of our coverage here from Netroots Nation, you can go to thericksmithshow.com, grab the podcast. Always there, always available. No matter where you get yours, you'll find ours. So thus far, looking at what we've been talking about, I got to tell you, the last segment there, most interesting for me. Look, it's one of those topics where I want to make sure that every worker is safe, every worker has opportunity. Little strange topic for me, talking about sex work and again, having daughters. Do I want that to be their career path? No, no, I don't. But if that's the path they choose, do want it to be safe. Don't want them to be locked up and harassed and all of that stuff. Which, in talking with Caitlin, that's the reality of the world that sex workers work in. And there's something fundamentally wrong with that. And it was explained to me as we were talking about this, over lunch. And I don't want my kids to, work as a shoe I can't even say it, a shoe shine person. But I want that job to be well compensated. I want that job to be safe. I don't want them working in a slaughterhouse, as Caitlin pointed out. But I want that job to be safe and one that you can make a living on. So this shouldn't be really, I guess, any different. And that if people have the choice and the freedom, that's the path they choose. I guess that's where my mindset is. And it's like a lot of things. I don't have to personally agree with it. I don't have to personally go, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. Yes, everyone should do this, and this is what. It doesn't have to be that. But the idea of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, pursuing your path, pursuing your dreams, your goals. That, to me, the important part of this. And again, you hear these stories of intimidation, of harassment, especially with her point of, if you're the hunted, you can't be the protected. The police are targeting these people. You can't be then the protected citizen when you're the targeted citizen, and that makes a lot of sense. So for me, the idea that we decriminalize it, I'm in favor of that. You get to the point where we know we're going to make this, something that little girls want to aspire to be or little boys aspire to be. I don't know. I think that's where you start to lose me, where we're now trying to make this a top tier, kind of profession. I'm going to struggle with that probably a little bit more. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think. rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day 53 construction tradesmen were killed in a fire at the Titan II ICBM launch complex near Searcy, Arkansas. It is considered one of the worst industrial accidents at a U.S. nuclear weapons facility. The complex was one of 4 sites containing Titan II missiles. Each missile weighed 340,000 pounds, measuring 103 feet in length and 10 feet in diameter. President Johnson had just committed more troops to the Vietnam War. The Air Force had hoped to strengthen the silo against a possible Soviet attack. They had contracted with Peter Kiewit and Son of Colorado to bring in electricians, carpenters, millwrights, painters, and pipe fitters for a number of tasks. Crews worked to shore up the silo, improve the blast doors, adjust hydraulics, and install emergency lighting. 52 of the 55 workers on all 9 levels of the silo were almost immediately asphyxiated when it suddenly filled with smoke and heat. The Air Force determined a welder on level 2 had accidentally pierced a high-pressure hydraulic line, igniting the fire. Investigators also concluded that the silo lacked adequate ventilation, alternative exits, and independent power sources. The contractor was held responsible for numerous safety violations, contributing to unsafe work conditions. The welder was found drowned in hydraulic fluid. 2 survivors suffered burns and smoke inhalation. They contested the Air Force's findings. One worker insisted no one had been welding on level 2. The other survivor stated he saw flames burst from the diesel engine just before the power went out. Both men insisted the fire started from below. By 1981, 2 more deadly accidents involving Titan II missiles would prompt President Reagan to order their deactivation.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
From corporate polluters to political bosses, power elites try to create a myth of inevitability, trying to make workaday people feel helpless, too small to change the injustices of the system. Don't bother is their message. But the feisty residents of Boxtown, Tennessee definitely did bother when they learned that a couple of profiteering fossil fuel giants were targeting them. Boxtown, a historic black neighborhood of Memphis settled by former slaves 160 years ago, was considered by Valero Energy and Plains All-American Pipeline to be politically powerless. So when these multi-billion-dollar petro powers decided to ram a dirty and dangerous pipeline through the Memphis area, Boxtown was their chosen route. The rich Texas oil barons even sneeringly called the lower-income community the point of least resistance. Boy, did they get that wrong. Those, quote, small people of Boxtown resisted fiercely and smartly. Most flat out refused to sell their family land at the thieving price offered by the oil slicks. They forged a unified grassroots coalition, Memphis Community Against the Pipeline, reached out to other neighborhoods and educated locals about the terrible safety records of the 2 corporate plunderers. They also enlisted environmental groups to help beat back the strong-arm attempt by Valero and Plains All-American to seize the people's property through eminent domain. It's a long story with many ups and downs, but the inspiring essence of it is that local, quote, nobodies defeated the big money and raw racist arrogance of a powerhouse duo of absentee corporate elites that disrespected and misjudged them. This is Jim Hightower saying grassroots communities and coalitions are winning such gutsy fights against corporate exploiters all across America. Remember this, even the smallest dog can lift its leg on the tallest building.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So spending a little time here in Pittsburgh, and I got to tell you, one of the things that jumps out at me here in the city, at least where we're at the David Lawrence Convention Center, right around here, everywhere I'm walking is charter schools, tons of them, and well, the couple of privatized schools as well. And I'm going, this is a city where you would hope you would have a handle on public education. We would be fighting for better schools in our public schools, but no, we're doing all the gimmicky stuff that we know does not work. That's why when I saw my good friend Jeff Bryant walking through the halls here at Netroots Nation, I said, there is somebody maybe can explain to me why I'm seeing so many charter schools here in Pittsburgh. Jeff is the chief correspondent for Independent Media Institute. He's also got a great website, edpolitics.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure, Rick. Great to talk to you again.
So, look, I'm walking down the streets here in Pittsburgh, and everywhere I look, right around this convention center are these pop-up charter schools. They look like storefronts.
Right.
And I'm going, is this the best alternative? Is this the best we've got?
Yeah, that's a prevalent issue everywhere, not just Pennsylvania, certainly not just Pittsburgh. And not to mention, in Pennsylvania, you've got a big problem with the cyber charters, which are not even located in the city where they can operate and recruit students. And you saw during the pandemic, for instance, that charters used that opportunity, that they used the pandemic as an opportunity to go out and recruit more parents. And now public school enrollments are down in many places. In the meanwhile, charters are growing. They keep proliferating in places where oftentimes they're not needed or wanted. And it's because politicians don't know what to do. They don't know how to talk about what's wrong with charters, that they actually undermine public schools. They siphon money away from the school. They operate as businesses primarily, secondarily as educational institutions. And oftentimes the people who run the charters are making a lot of money, particularly off of the real estate or other aspects of the school. Yep. That they can profitize.
No, and it's all about the money. I mean, this is my problem with it. You turn on the radio, you're driving on the road, you hear on the radio, this charter school, that charter school. Those are tax dollars being spent on advertising how wonderful these crummy charter schools are. Right. When those are dollars that should be in the classroom, making sure that we've got the best resources, better paid teachers, smaller class, anything but a stupid radio ad.
Right. And you got the situation here in Pennsylvania where Governor Wolf is trying to do something about the cyber charters, because the cyber charters get the same per pupil revenue as the public schools do. Yeah. In the meantime, the cyber charters, they don't have a building other than an office, where they collect the checks. They don't have the costs of the same amount of teachers, because they have enormous class sizes, almost sometimes over 100 kids per teacher, and yet you've got Pennsylvania sending them the same amount of per pupil money as what they send to the public schools that have all these costs, the heating costs, the building, the transportation, the faculty. And he's trying to do something about that here, and the Republicans keep blocking him.
And I don't know why, because the one positive that I can come up with out of the pandemic is most people realize that cyber charters, cyber school ain't the future. And I got to tell you, I was a little concerned that eventually we were going to be pushed into that was going to be the model of the future. Oh no, everyone gets to go to cyber school. I think parents are like, no. Every parent I know is no. Back into the classrooms.
Right. You don't even have to look necessarily at the data. For instance, the graduation rates are horrible.
Right.
That student retention is awful. They can compensate for that by continuing to market over and over and over again to bring in new people. But just go out, like you said, talk to parents who had to live through the pandemic with their kid online, and they'll tell you that it's an inferior form of education and does not work.
But, the thing that gets me is there's a situation in Columbus, Ohio, where the teachers are potentially going to go on strike. Yeah. And the response by the district is, well, we're just going to go to cyber charter. We're just going to bring in the union busters of cyber charter to break up your strike. And I find that interesting.
Yeah, it's awful. And you would think that another lesson of the pandemic would be, the teachers were heroes during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. They came up as strongly as they could. They're worried about their health. Everybody was worried about their health. Everybody's worried about spreading the disease. But teachers did heroic things, go way beyond the above their normal work. And so you'd think that one lesson would be like, hey, maybe we ought to pay these people more.
Maybe I ought to treat them a little bit better.
Yeah, I want to treat them a little bit better. But now we're having big teacher shortages around the country.
And why is that surprising?
Right, it's not surprising at all. You know, teachers are going, why should I continue to do this work? I get attacked for teaching basic U.S. history. I get attacked for trying to create a lively, interesting classroom for my children. And then I keep getting poor pay, lousy benefits. They keep cutting my health care. And so no wonder. Not only are teachers leaving, but there's way fewer teachers that are in the pipeline because young people are saying, well, I know what's going to happen to me if I go do this job.
No, my youngest daughter, she said she wanted to be a teacher. And I'm like, oh, are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Maybe you might want to do something else, dishwasher or something. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Jeff Bryant. Jeff is the chief correspondent for the Independent Media Institute. You might want to check out his website at politics.org. We'll get links out on social media. Now, we're here at Netroots Nation. I've seen you here for years.
Yes.
I think you've probably been to all of these, right?
Not quite. This is I lost count, either 11th or 12th.
Just about.
I've had panels at least 6 years. And this year I have a panel that's going to be talking about how Democrats desperately need a winning strategy for education. We've seen, particularly in Virginia, in the governor's race there, how Democratic candidates, in this case it was a candidate named Terry McAuliffe, who was running for the Democratic ticket, and he was running against a Republican named Glenn Youngkin, who was coming across as a very suburban dad type image, nice guy. But McAuliffe got completely flummoxed on the argument about education.
Yep.
Because Youngkin said, we've got a problem with our parents believe their children are being indoctrinated in our public schools. And McAuliffe didn't know what to say about that. And so he came out with probably the lamest statement possible, which was, I don't think parents should have control over what their kids are learning in school. Which, okay, I think he does have somewhat of a point. No single parent ought to control what all children learn in a school. But he didn't say it that way. Instead, he came out with the worst possible framing for that. And parents who were toying with this idea of going with this nice guy Republican, they were like, okay, he's my guy.
Yeah.
Because this person is clueless. And we're seeing that in other places as well, where Democrats just get tongue-tied. You were talking about the issue of charter schools. Well, one of the biggest fans of charter schools was President Obama.
Yep, Arnie Duncan.
And it's like they don't know what to say when the issue comes up. And so they just say, well, we ought to have great schools for all kids and not go anywhere near the fact was, what do you mean? We ought to have more charter schools? Is that what you're saying? Don't you understand that, that siphons funding away from schools? And how can we have great schools for all kids when this school that's lost so much money to charters all of a sudden has to cut art, has to cut gym, has to increase class size? How's that creating better education for all kids? It's not.
It's not. And it's not supposed to. And this is the part that I don't think Democrats get. Because, Republicans don't want to make education better. They want to destroy public education.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
And I think recently I look at, Doug Mastriano, the guy who's running for governor here in Pennsylvania, where I'm at. We're going to cut education funding in half. We're going to give parents, like $9,000, $10,000, and they can choose where to send their kids. Or, and I've been saying this for years, and finally, one of them has said it, or the parents can just keep it and homeschool them. Yeah. Ultimately, that's where the religious right wants to get to where taxpayers are paying people to keep their kids at home and uneducate them.
When you look at the right-wing agenda, like what's written in these think tanks that are all across the country in places like the Heritage Foundation, they don't come out and say it openly, but in their offices, in the information they share with each other, their goal is to make education totally a private good.
Yep.
Now, that means that parents are going to have to pay for their own. I mean, that's what the right-wing agenda is all about. But they know they can't come out and say that because that is a wildly unpopular idea.
Sure, especially for the 90% of us who don't have hardly any wealth.
Right.
that means our kids are going to get substandard education. And this is where dividing the education dollar and dividing our education system has always been a bad idea. I've always been of the belief that everyone should have to go to one school, rich kids, poor kids, everyone, because the rich parents, they're going to demand that education be at a higher quality so that their kids get what they want, and that's going to raise everybody else up.
Right. That was the whole idea behind Brown versus Board of Education. That Supreme Court decision back in, I think it was 54, something like that, that made it illegal to segregate students in public schools on the basis of race. You know, some people criticize the ruling because they say it was this cockamamie idea that if a black kid sits across the aisle from a white kid, he's automatically going to have white intelligence rub off, which was never, ever the thinking behind the court at all. The decision was about exactly what you said, that if people who are least empowered in our society, like black and brown kids, poor kids, are going to the same schools as the people who are most empowered, then they will benefit from the voice from all of the parents in that school who are going to demand, well, wait a second, we're not, you're going to educate our kids great because that's what we demand.
Yeah, no, look, if in my school district where my kids go to school, they didn't have a nurse, they didn't have a librarian, they didn't have, music or art, you'd hear people screaming, and I would be at the front of the pack. But you go into a lot of our inner city schools where these charter schools seem to be prevalent, and the public schools don't have nurses, they don't have librarians, they don't have what we take as just basic necessities for a public school. They don't have that.
Right, and the charter industry is well aware of that, and that's why they frequently target these urban areas where there's blight and where people where people don't have access to great schools. They target that because they know that that's where they can find disgruntled parents.
And there's a reason for that, and they should be angry. They should be ticked off. But the latest silver bullet never seems to work. I mean, when I was a kid, it was busing. We were going to take poor kids from one side of the city of Cleveland, and we were going to ship them to another poor side on the other side of the city of Cleveland. We were just shuffling poor people around. We never went and got other people into this. And I, even as a kid, went, how come we just don't change the districts? And had we just changed the school district lines, I think we would have gotten much better outcomes.
Right. Nicole Hannah-Jones has pointed out frequently that some of the most integrated schools in America are in the South, and which is like, really? But one of the reasons for that is because during Reconstruction, the federal government made the South redistrict schools to where there were not city schools. You had to draw your district lines based on a county, and so you've got these counties now that have the suburban families in the same schools as the urban kids, and it's led to a more integrated situation. But you still have the most segregated communities in America are still in the north, places like Milwaukee.
Comes down to money. It's all about even as a kid, I said, it's not about black and white, it's about green.
Yeah.
Those of us who are broke, we just don't have it. So let me ask you, Jeff. I mean, you're doing this panel here at Netroots, how Democrats desperately need a message on education. What is it? What do you think that message is? How should McAuliffe have answered that question when he was asked? Because everyone agrees universally he screwed that up, and it cost him the election, along with a whole bunch of other things.
Right.
But that really was the point. You go, that was it. What was the right answer in that moment?
Well, I think it's like I said, that no single parent or small group of loud parents should control what all kids get exposure to. And that's why we want a democratically controlled system where everybody has a voice. Now, you have the situation where people who are more empowered, people who are also getting money from right-wing groups, storm these school boards and demand certain things. But what McAuliffe should have said was, look, I know that this one group of parents that you're talking about should have a voice in schools, but why aren't we listening to the black and brown parents who are the ones who have to face discrimination?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And hopefully they find that message, and hopefully they figure out how to deal with this. Because look, as you're dividing the pot, we're losing.
Right.
We're losing badly.
And that's what the right wing understands. They know if they make schools a contentious place, for instance, on this attack on so-called CRT, they know that, first of all, it's alienating white families because the white families, some of them start to listen to them and go, like, maybe my kid is being indoctrinated. But then the families of color also listen and go, like, I don't want to go to a school where you've got these loud parents who are teaching anything about what race, when I want my kid to know the true history of how this country treated people with his skin color. And so they know that that's a divisive argument, and that they know that parents who are concerned, regardless of their skin color, are going to start pulling their kids out of the public schools and sending them off to these places like charters and schools and vouchers.
No, this is where the privatizers, they're going to win, because we're going to segregate schools based on ideology and on skin color and on all this stuff, and on wealth.
Yeah. That's what the voucher argument is. That's why it's a totally specious argument.
Oh, no. Look, we had Mike Fulmer on the show, who got into a whole bunch of trouble in Pennsylvania for some bizarre stuff. We won't get into that. But he had a voucher plan. And I asked him point blank, if I win one of these golden tickets, you give me one of these wonderful vouchers, will I be able to send my kids to Abington Friends School in Philadelphia, which is about $40,000 a year? And he said, absolutely, without question. And I go, no, that's not what your bill says. Your own bill doesn't say that. Right. But he was pitching this idea that you get this golden ticket, you're going to be able to go. And I'm going, that's not what your bill says.
Yeah, I think the average dollar amount that a voucher tends to pay for across the country, now it varies from state to state, but I think the average is $7,000. $7,000 is not going to buy your kid much of an education. So people have studied the states that have had the voucher programs the longest, like Indiana and Arizona and Florida. And what they found is that actually most of the families that use the vouchers, they never had their children in public school to begin with.
It was just another subsidy for the wealthy.
Right. So basically it's a coupon program is what you're doing. You're providing wealthy people a coupon so they get a little bit of a cost break on that expensive private school they're sending their kids to.
Yeah, I mean, we got the same thing here. We got the education opportunity scholarships, or whatever they're called.
Oh, yeah. They always dream up these wonderful sounding names. Yeah.
It's just handouts to rich people, welfare for rich people.
Right.
As we're for poor people, we have to call it welfare for them. They get educational opportunity scholarships or educational investment tax credits, or all of these wonderful euphemistic names.
Yeah, it's all a perception game. Even the whole idea about private schools is a perception game, because when you take out the contributing factors for student achievement, first of all, when you consider the wealth of the student's family, you consider their access to privilege, you consider whether they get to go on fabulous summer trips or they get after-school programs. When you take that into account, private schools don't provide any better education than public schools do. The main difference is that wealthier people go to private schools, and that's why the kids do better on things like the SAT. It's just that. Nothing else.
That whole Horatio Alger thing that you're going to live in poverty and pull yourself up by the bootstraps single-handedly. That's a nice fantasy.
Yeah, it's a lie.
Yeah. But, Jeff, I appreciate the time. It's always good seeing you.
Likewise.
I hope the panel goes well, and I hope Democrats figure out what that message is going to be.
I hope so, too. I wish they'd live stream the panel so, some of these candidates across the country could tune in and get a clue. Let's hope so.
They most certainly definitely need it. But I appreciate the time, Jeff. As always, great stuff. I'm going to take a quick break back here from Netroots Nation. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1997. That was the day that a strike by the Teamsters Union against UPS ended with a victory for the union. The strike had started 15 days earlier. More than 180,000 UPS workers participated in the action. It was the first nationwide strike by UPS workers. At the time, UPS delivered 80% of all packages in the United States. The company, known for its signature brown trucks, delivered 12 million packages a day. The key issue of the strike was that the company increasingly relied on part-time workers. The insecurities of part-time work were growing not just at UPS, but for workers in industries all across the country. The strike settlement came with the union winning its core issues. The company agreed to convert 10,000 part-time jobs to full-time positions over the course of the next 5 years. The victory was significant for the U.S. labor movement. The 1980s and 1990s saw new attacks on labor unions and working people, starting with President Ronald Reagan's breaking of the Air Traffic Controller Union strike in 1981. The UPS victory in a national strike with broad rank-and-file support encouraged working people beyond the Teamsters Union. Announcing the settlement of the strike, ABC News anchor Peter Jennings declared, quote, "It's been the most dramatic confrontation between industry and organized labor in 2 decades. Teamsters President Ron Carey said, quote, "It's what this country needs. Decent jobs, a chance for the dream, a chance to purchase a home, a chance to bring your children up properly, a chance to send them to college. Enough is enough, and it's about time that people start fighting back on this."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we wrap up day 2 here at Netroots Nation, a lot of interesting conversations today. Hope you've enjoyed our coverage of the conference. If you missed any portion of it, make sure you check out the website, thericksmithshow.com, where you can find all of our podcasts. Miss anything? Well, that's where you go. I got to tell you, in talking with Jeff Bryant there a minute ago, I couldn't help but think back to Mike Fulmer, the former state senator from here in Pennsylvania's idea about charter schools and voucher programs. And I'm glad Jeff went into a little bit about, what basically a ripoff they are. I go back to this, and the idea that he floated at the time were that these golden tickets, that this was going to give, every child this great opportunity to go to these wonderful private schools. And the reality is you were going to handpick just 1 or 2 out of the masses to be the winners. And this is the right-wing wish. This is their wish. We're gonna pick 1 or 2 really special poor kids, and we're gonna make them the example of the Horatio Alger pulled themselves up by their bootstraps to make everybody else feel like, hey, it's possible. And shame on you for not doing it, while not having the resources and the opportunities. But again, this idea of using education as a dividing line. The right's not going to tell you they want to destroy public education so they can make it a commodity that they can profit off of. That doesn't sell. But they will sell you on this idea, it's about choice. You have choice. Look, I don't know anybody who wants the choice between 2 bad options. You want 1 really good thing, and this is where I keep coming back to. We need an education system that is well-funded, one with the very best people in charge of it, doing the work that needs to be done, not a whole world of choice. But again, when the right tries to sell us on this, they look at a system that's struggling because, the funding cuts that they've done over the years, the wealth inequality in this country, the deindustrialization that's destroyed our cities and our communities has gutted our system. They want you to believe that, hey, this silver bullet, that's what's going to fix this. That's what's going to make it all better. And what it really is it's a way to destroy our public education system so that they can pick the winners and losers. And by the way, the most important part of it, they can profit from it. And I go back to the whole charter school movement from its inception was about giving teachers the ability to do things differently, the freedom to try new things and share best practices. It was never never, I repeat, never about profitizing and privatizing public education in a way that lines the pockets of the very wealthy and destroys the system as a whole. Sorry, that's just not what it was meant to do. That simple. But I'm glad Jeff shared some of that. Love to hear your thoughts. If you missed any of our coverage here from Roots Nation in Pittsburgh, by all means, check out the podcast. Love to hear your thoughts. Questions, comments, by all means, reach out, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
The bill I'm about to sign is not just about today, it's about tomorrow. It's about delivering progress and prosperity to American families.
Inflation Reduction Act's landmark climate action is now the law of the land, as
the worst drought in 1,200 years, as water managers in 7 states, 30 tribal nations, and Mexico fighting over every